My nightmare mother-in-law tried to pressure me into letting my wife get impregnated by another man, so I socked him in the face and walked out. My wife Elena was 27 years old at the time. She had an older sister named Adriana who was married to a guy named Ariel. My wife's mother, Valentina, never accepted me. She tried to make many excuses to separate us, even going as far as saying you can't marry an N-word. She really discriminated against me and humiliated me every chance she got. She always said that Elena deserved something better. The thing is, I thought my life was perfect. Elena was incredibly beautiful, the most stunning woman I had ever met. At that time, my salary as a mechanical engineer was decent. We had agreed not to have children soon. First, we wanted to travel to some countries and finish paying for a house. A year after we got married, Elena's mother suffered a fall that left her hospitalized for a couple of days. The doctors reported that it was nothing serious, but they recommended bed rest. Elena was distraught about her mother and stayed with her. Time passed, and during the 30th wedding anniversary party of Elena's parents, two shocking announcements were made. My wife's older sister Adriana had been struggling for 5 long years to have children, visiting fertility clinics without success. It was a heartbreaking situation for her, to suffer in silence that inability. Valentina's confession was the second shocking announcement. With a trembling voice and tears in her eyes, she expressed that she longed to become a grandmother. Her words, full of a sense of urgency, resonated deeply. A fall could be the end of me, and who knows when it could happen. I watched as Elena broke down emotionally upon hearing her mother's words. Upon returning home, my wife was noticeably affected by the weight of what had happened. I chose to ignore the situation, a mistake of mine that I did not want to face. The months passed without further news, until I received an urgent call from Elena. Her voice reflected anguish as she explained that she was in the hospital. I was alarmed. "Are you okay?" I asked with fear. She replied that she was, but that she was there because Adriana had attempted suicide. Adriana's inability to have children had plunged her into a deep depression, and Valentina's words, with her longing to be a grandmother, had been the trigger. Despair led her to try to end her life. As soon as I got off work, I rushed to the hospital to support my wife. I found Valentina there, her gaze cold and somewhat accusatory. Adriana's husband Ariel, Julio, Valentina's husband, and my wife were also there. I tried to understand the situation, and to some extent, Valentina blamed me for Adriana's suicide attempt. According to her, her desire to be a grandmother and Adriana's inability to give her a grandchild had led her to try to take her own life. The doctors released Adriana from the hospital 2 days later and prescribed her antidepressants. That same day, we had a family meeting where we revisited the topic of grandchildren for Adriana's infertility. I proposed the idea of adoption as a viable alternative. Both Adriana and Ariel could adopt without any difficulty, as they were adults with good incomes. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. Valentina looked at me firmly and rejected the idea, arguing that adopting a child was not the same as having a grandchild of their own blood. The conversation did not progress and we returned home with a tense atmosphere. The weeks after that meeting became strange. Adriana and Ariel started visiting my house more often. I often heard them talking, but when they entered, they kept quiet. On the other hand, Elena's behavior changed. She became more reserved with her phone and distant with me. When I came home and tried to get close to her, she would pull away. In addition, our intimate life decreased. On July 5th, a day that I remember clearly, I came home from work and saw several cars parked in front of my house. I feared the worst. When I entered, I found my in-laws, my sister-in-law with her husband, and my wife in the living room. Their expressions indicated seriousness. Elena told me, "Sit down, we need to talk." I nodded and sat down. I tried to ask what was happening, but my mother-in-law interrupted me by asking, "What solution can you give us?" I remained silent. I did not understand what she was referring to. Then, she added, "About my grandchildren." I tried to suggest in vitro fertilization, explaining how it worked, but I only found the disgust on Valentina's face. In her old woman's expression, I noticed that she rejected my proposal and said, "I have another solution." As I said that, I looked at Elena, confused, but she didn't look back at me. Instead, she looked at her sister and then her mother. I saw Adriana smiling, while Adriana's husband Ariel showed a haughty attitude. His smile turned mocking, looking at me with superiority. I kept silent and waited for Elena to say something, but she didn't speak, prolonging the silence. Suddenly, Elena shouted at me, "Idiot, say something." I didn't understand and kept silent. Then, my mother-in-law tried to calm Elena down, speaking with a certain elegance. "As you know, dear, Adriana has been cursed with the impossibility of giving us grandchildren, that joy of motherhood that she cannot experience." Elena interrupted and explained that they had analyzed options, mentioning the risks of surrogacy, the possible genetic and hereditary problems that could arise generations later. Then, Ariel added that surrogacy was expensive and that they could not afford it, in addition to the expenses that the baby would require. "So, what do you propose?" I asked. My mother-in-law's evil answer left me speechless. "Since you refuse to have children, Elena will become pregnant with Ariel." I swallowed hard, unable to utter a word, hoping it was a joke. However, my mother-in-law continued speaking. "We understand that you don't want to take care of the baby. Don't worry, when it is born, we will register it in the name of Adriana and Ariel." Then she mentioned, "Children are not products, they are not made in a laboratory, they must be conceived with love, the fruit of a couple." She explained a series of religious arguments, citing the church's prohibition and her desire to prevent her grandchild from being condemned to hell. Before my mother-in-law could continue, I stood up abruptly and shouted, "No way." I don't usually raise my voice, but I did on this occasion. "Elena, what do you want to tell me?" I asked my wife. I saw her expression change between confusion and fear. My mother-in-law looked at me defiantly, trying to explain to me, apparently thinking that I would not react this way. Ariel approached me, trying to put his hand on my shoulder, and I said, "Don't touch me." I was really upset. My mother-in-law insisted that she wanted a grandchild. It was then that I added, "Fine, I'll give her a grandchild." We'll try to conceive next week. My mother-in-law intervened again. We respect your decision not to have children yet. I understand that you are young and still have the urge to explore, therefore, Ariel will be the one to take care of it. Adriana agrees that her son be conceived in the act of love, therefore, it will be between Elena and Ariel. At these words, I shouted again, "You're crazy, old witch." Everyone was surprised at my response. My mother-in-law shed crocodile tears. Julio approached her, and so did Adriana. Elena looked at me and shouted at me, asking me how I could say that. Ariel approached me and I remember he said to me, "Come on, it will be fun." At that moment, I landed a punch so hard on Ariel's face that he fell to the ground. Adriana screamed. Elena too. I shouted at them to leave my house and left, locking myself in the bedroom. I could hear some shouts and saw them leaving home through the window. Minutes later, Elena entered quite upset, complaining to me for having offended her mother. She ignored the simple fact that they were trying to convince me that my wife have intimacy with another man. Elena did not speak to me all day. When I woke up, I found her in the kitchen. She looked like she had been crying. She called me immature for not understanding the situation, mentioned that my mother-in-law was in critical condition. I decided to ignore her and did not take her to the hospital. The worst was yet to come, however. I returned home at night after having spent the day with my best friend Abraham. He suggested that it would be a good idea to leave the city with my wife, so we would not be so close to her family. When I arrived home, I saw Elena sad. She had been crying. She told me that her mother was hospitalized and in critical condition. I told her that didn't care. She told me that her mother only wanted a grandchild. I mentioned that she could wait a year more, but she said, "You don't understand. Adriana is still depressed. I fear she will attempt suicide again." I kept silent and said, "Okay, we can try to have a child soon." She looked at me happy, smiled, told me it was okay, that we would try, and left. The days passed without incident, except for a change in Elena's attitude. Now she didn't hide her phone and looked at me happily. Her mother apologized to me, said she understood my decision. According to medical orders, she should not be stressed or angry. I was surprised. I didn't expect that from that woman. Elena became more affectionate with me. I recognized that those months were quite interesting, but there was something that I found strange. I didn't know what it was, but it was strange. 6 months later, I can say that I was more in love with Elena. I didn't know how, but somehow I managed to give her what she asked for. If Elena wanted a new TV, I bought it for her. If Elena asked for a day at the spa, I gave it to her. Somehow at that time, everything Elena did or said became my priority, and I did it to see her happy. I knew that my words and my attitude had hurt her, and I wanted to see her happy. My mother-in-law Valentina no longer insisted on having grandchildren and Adriana seemed to be better. I was happy for them, and I also had a surprise planned, something I had been planning. You see, I had been saving up enough money for a long vacation in Canada. I wanted to take Elena on vacation. All those previous stressful situations were a lot, and I wanted to surprise her. I returned home from work on March 6th. I had the tickets ready to travel in 2 weeks. I arrived home and found the house empty. I went upstairs to the bedroom and found a note from Elena that said, "Hey, you'll see that nothing in our relationship changes. I love you more than ever and I know you do too. My mother has become more affectionate with you. She appreciates you in her own way. However, Adriana cannot be happy, and I know that the guilt of giving her a grandchild is destroying her. I hadn't told you, but I know you're going to understand. You've changed a lot in these months and I know you're mature enough and you love me too much. My parents, Adriana and Ariel, will do what we planned 6 months ago. Today we are leaving town. I will get pregnant by Ariel. I will not tell you where we are because I know you and I should not suffer stressful situations, and Ariel either. Adriana told me that he gets nervous and maybe we can't conceive on the first try. That's why we'll be gone for a month. Don't bother looking for us. I will return when I am pregnant. This does not change our relationship. We will pretend that nothing happened. No one in the family knows, and that's how it will stay, just between us." When I finished reading the note, I felt sadness and humiliation. I cried. I won't deny it. It had hurt me, but I believe that in a marriage there must be a mutual agreement. Trust must be the basis. Elena didn't care and walked all over me, along with her mother. The sadness I felt turned into indifference 2 days later. I understood one thing that I didn't know: the persuasion techniques of some people. Both Elena and her mother persuaded me to try to see myself as the husband who obeys everything and forgives, but even this I would not do. I would not let them walk all over me. I drove to Elena's parents' house, and as the note said, they were not there. I returned home, annoyed and humiliated. I told Abraham the situation. He gave me his support. We had a couple of beers, and he asked me what I would do. I didn't know how to answer and I just said nothing. I tried to call Elena. I was surprised to discover that she had left her phone at home. I knew she had done it on purpose. She always charged it. I checked the cell phone and the conversations and messages with her family were normal. There was nothing. That weekend did nothing but increase my hatred for her and her family. In short, my wife was cheating on me with her brother-in-law repeatedly because he was nervous and could not conceive, which is nonsense, in my opinion. I came up with a plan. I took tickets to go to Canada, packed all of my things. I had enough money saved to live for 3 months. In addition to that, I sold my car and asked Abraham for a loan. I told him I was going to Canada and I would never come back. He said it was okay. I just asked him to keep me in touch about what happened. I took Elena's phone and left. I quit my job and asked that they not contact me again, including my wife. In my 3rd week in Canada, there was a WhatsApp notification on Elena's phone. I opened the message and saw that they were Elena's relatives. Her sister, her mother, her father, Ariel, were in a kind of group with the name Baby. Adriana had sent a message that said, "It was achieved as a family. After more than 20 attempts we will finally have a grandchild." Adriana shared a photo of Ariel smiling. "That face of you one I will never forget it." My wife Elena was next to him in bed. I could see that she was in undies and after that a photo of a pregnancy test. Seeing my wife with Ariel filled me with sadness, but I was too far away and I didn't want to see her again. Several messages from the family arrived congratulating the anecdote. 4 days later, I was looking for a job in Canada. Fortunately, my engineering knowledge and being able to speak 2 languages gave me the opportunity to start working in a small factory as a warehouseman. It was not much, but it paid well to survive. When Elena came home though, it all hit the fan. A week after that, on a Sunday morning, I received a message from Elena on my phone that said, "Love, I'm home, everything went well, I'm pregnant. Come soon, I have something to tell you." I didn't respond to the message. I decided to ignore it. I spent the day in Toronto, walking in the park, until I received another message from Elena. "Darling, come home. We need to talk about this." I ignored Elena's message again. The messages continued to arrive, as well as calls that I did not answer. All afternoon I received messages and calls from Elena, Adriana, Ariel, and that evil witch of a mother-in-law. This situation escalated and involved my father. I received a call from him, quite worried, asking me where I was and if I was okay. I hadn't told him anything, so I simply responded by asking him who was calling. He told me that Elena was worried and had contacted him to see if I was with him. I explained the situation to my father. He seemed incredulous at first, but in the end he ended up believing me. I told my father that I would bring him with me as soon as I could, and I told him to block my wife. My phone continued to be flooded with voicemails and calls. In one of those voicemail messages, Elena could be heard crying, "Love, please answer. Where are you? Come back, we need to talk about this for real." I simply ignored the messages. I believed that my act of ignoring her was a message in itself. I turned off my phone for 15 days, got a new one in Canada. I set my social media to private without removing Elena or her family, just hid them. I acquired another phone to communicate with Abraham. He told me that Elena had gone to see him, but he didn't let her in. When she asked him where I was, he replied, "You could have asked him while you were fooling around with your brother-in-law," and closed the door, threatening to call the police. When I turned on my phone, I found over 100 messages on social media and calls from Elena and her family. Most were from Elena, begging for forgiveness. "Please, I still love you. This means nothing. I want to give you your first child. This is for my sister. Hey, don't ignore me. Please answer me. I love you." Her messages were filled with pleas and audio messages of her crying, begging for forgiveness. There were also messages from my mother-in-law reproaching my attitude, saying I was irresponsible and that my behavior could affect her grandchild. Elena was losing weight due to worry, and doctors had to hospitalize her for a nervous breakdown. I simply blocked my mother-in-law's number. That was during the first year. My father came to live with me, and he's doing well. Fortunately, I got a better job, and things were going well. Elena kept sending messages. It turns out that fortunately, the illegitimate child with her brother-in-law had no health issues, and I'm glad the baby is fine. He's not to blame for what happened, and I sincerely wish him to grow up healthy and happy. Elena cut ties with her family, blaming them for persuading and forcing her to have a child with Ariel. Despite everything, she keeps trying to find out where I am. I decided to break the silence. Every time she sends me messages, I simply respond with happy emojis in the face of her desperation. Although she tells me she still loves me, I believe that if she really loved me, she wouldn't have acted this way. She's tried in many ways to find out where I am, but only my friend Abraham knows. I decided to answer a video call from Elena that I received. I suppose I did it to know how she was. However, I kept my camera off. I didn't want her to see me. She was no longer that beautiful woman. She looked worn out and aged. She tried to apologize, but I told her it would be brief. The sum of your actions defines who you are. You made a decision by overriding me, something you knew I didn't agree with. You confused my love with obedience, and that's something I won't allow. I'm living what I promised you, traveling, but I'm doing it alone. Maybe by this time, we would be expecting a child because patience is a virtue that is cultivated. I won't give you the divorce even if you try. You'll carry that on your conscience forever. As for me, I haven't met anyone, nor will I. I guess actions have consequences. You reap what you sow. I am reaping mine, and you are reaping yours. After that, I heard Elena break down in tears, and I ended the call. Currently, I live in Montreal, recovering from my past life. Since then, I haven't heard from her again.